Today on CityCast Madison. The Wisconsin Supreme Court race is a buzz and much more than usual. Our state court elections used to fly under the radar, but those quiet days are over with an increasingly political bench. Abortion rights, voting rights, gerrymandering. Control of the court hangs in the balance. It's the first time in nearly 15 years that there could be a huge power shift. We sat down with Jeff Mayers, president of WisPolitics.com, an online political news service in Madison. It's Thursday, December 8th. I'm Bianca Martin, and this is CityCast Madison. So, Jeff, why are people already talking about this Supreme Court race? Am I wrong in thinking these races tend to be kind of sleepy and the primary's not until February? What's at stake here?
Well, people are excited because it means the philosophical control of the state Supreme Court, which has been in conservative hands since 2008. Democrats have been inching back. You know, they won a big election with Joe Karofsky in 2020. And, that narrowed the gap to 4-3 with Brian Hagedorn, a conservative who is kind of a swing vote in big decisions. Republicans are really honed in on trying to keep a philosophical majority on the court that has, served them well, from redistricting to certain election decisions. All these things are building up. You have big decisions probably coming up on abortion rights. The redistricting matter could come back before the court. You have all kinds of elections decisions that could be revisited or come back before the court in a different way. So, all these things are controversial in a swing state, in a purple state that receives a lot of national attention and decides presidential elections. These things are really important. You have a four-way primary coming up. The parties will get involved after that, assuming that a liberal and a conservative get through. So it's high stakes.
It's definitely high stakes. And as you said, so the justices are going to be deciding on things like the abortion law, talking about redistricting, different things about how elections run. There's the huge attention on those issues, and this is talking about the control of the court. So let's talk about the candidates, like you said. So far, there are 4. 2 conservatives, 2 liberals, and we should say that these races are officially nonpartisan, but for all intents and purposes, this is a partisan race. On the conservative side, there's Jennifer Dorow, the Waukesha County judge. She's challenging Dan Kelly, the former Wisconsin Supreme Court justice. And would you tell us, how do those 2 conservative candidates differ?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure they differ on the issues that much. That remains to be seen. Jennifer Dorow she's known primarily for presiding over the Waukesha County Christmas parade trial. I don't think we know that much about where she is on certain issues that would come before the Supreme Court. I mean, I think she's a grassroots conservative. The difference is we know what Dan Kelly is. And I think that's what the Dan Kelly campaign is banking on in some respects. He was appointed by Scott Walker. He seems to be favored by Scott Walker in part because his son, Alex Walker, is running the campaign. He was appointed by Walker but lost to Joe Karofsky in 2020. And he's been running basically for the court ever since. Jennifer Dorow is a former prosecutor and a former defense counsel. He came up through the ranks, clerking for judges and, working on big cases. In fact, on a redistricting case. So she's more of the grassroots, and he's more of the Federalist Society, a sort of big judicial issue types. And so it's a contrast in styles at the moment. I don't think we know exactly, is there an issue breakdown where they differ?
So grassroots versus establishment, in essence.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Dorow was also appointed by Scott Walker, but she's, appointed to a Waukesha County judgeship.
Let's talk about the liberals. It looks like Madison versus Milwaukee. There's Everett Mitchell, a Dane County judge, and Janet Protasewicz, the Milwaukee County judge. How would those 2 candidates differ? What do we know about them?
Well, I think they're much different in style. Again, would they differ on, the key cases? Again, judges aren't supposed to be campaigning on I will take this position if elected. I think there's less nuance in Supreme Court campaigns these days on things like that. Everett Mitchell, he would be the first African American elected to the court. Louis Butler was appointed to the court by Governor Jim Doyle and then lost in 2008 to Michael Gableman. And Jim Doyle is actually supporting Everett Mitchell. And Everett Mitchell has been a Dane County judge for a couple terms. He heads the juvenile crime section and is proud of reducing recidivism amongst Dane County youth. He's a Baptist minister. He's a dynamic candidate, and he's from very blue, very Democratic voter-rich Dane County. Judge Janet, she's has a long career in Milwaukee County judicial and law and order background. She was a prosecutor in the district attorney's office, specialized in victims' rights often. Then she became a Milwaukee County judge. And she's a woman in a race where abortion rights is still going to be on the ballot like it was in November. So I think that's a pretty good place to be in politics right now.
It's possible that we end up with two conservative, there's two spots and two conservatives could get it. It's not necessarily likely, right? But it's possible.
Right. I think it's unlikely that we'd have two conservatives or two liberals, but I don't think we can rule that out until we can see how the campaigns are forming.
One of the candidates have recently gotten so much media attention, which is Jennifer Dorow, right? Because she presided over the Waukesha Christmas parade trial, where the man drove into a parade and killed 6 people. She issued the maximum sentence against Darrell Brooks, the attacker, who's out on bail. How do you think this trial might set the tone for this election?
Well, it certainly helps her get a start. Like as I said, the problem is she does it. Her campaign is starting from zero compared to where Dan Kelly's campaign was. So she has a lot of work to do, and the financial backers of the super PAC backing Dan Kelly signal they'll spend whatever it takes. So can she match that? Can grassroots media-driven campaign, let's say all of Milwaukee talk radio says Judge Dorow is the one, okay. Could that counter the money on and the experience of the Dan Kelly campaign? Maybe it's talk radio in Milwaukee isn't as united perhaps as it used to be, but it's certainly talk radio, if it does, conservative talk radio and conservative media, if they do get behind a candidate that is meaningful, and it can work certainly in primaries.
I'm curious about the being tough on crime, like in terms of this trial, how that might, in terms of the issues and how that might drive some of the discussion we're seeing around the election.
Right. Well, again, the Supreme Court isn't like a trial judge, right? It's a different type of court, and it's supposed to hear cases that come up through the ranks. But again, this is elections, and emotions are at play, and so law and order is huge. It helps to have been a prosecutor or have been tough on the bench. I think that's an advantage here. That's why it's an advantage for Protasewicz to be a former prosecutor too. These are good things to be on the resume. Always the problem is if you have a long history, there are these cases that come back and become notorious for some reason. The campaigns, I'm sure, are busy doing their opposition research right now to find such cases or to find things that will weaken a candidate in terms of this law and order approach. A smart columnist for Isthmus, reminded us recently, about Everett Mitchell leading a chant, what could be seen as an anti-police chant after the George Floyd murder. Will that appear in an ad if he gets through the primary? No doubt about it. Now he seems, well, I'll take it on. I'm proud of my record. I have law enforcement on my side. I'm not afraid to talk about this issue. Mandela Barnes didn't seem to have a ready answer when he was hit with all that in the U.S. Senate race. And there was an overwhelming Republican money surge at that point, too.
Yeah, I've been wondering, how Mandela Barnes' Senate race might impact Everett Mitchell's campaign, since they're both Black men who are progressive, particularly on criminal justice issues.
I mean, there was, a lot of chatter in Democratic circles. Wow, when things were looking bad for Mandela Barnes, wow, wouldn't we have been better off if Sarah Godlewski had been the nominee? Sarah Godlewski, the state treasurer who hailed from Eau Claire, and she was endorsed by abortion rights groups. Well, yeah, but she didn't win the primary. Okay, so Mandela Barnes is there, and even though his campaign seemed to have not had a ready response, or Democrats in general didn't come to his defense, immediately and combat those ads with equal amount of ads of their own. But still, he came within 27,000 votes of beating an incumbent. If Everett Mitchell gets through the primary, the Democratic Party will be there. The political parties get involved in these races, and the Democratic Party will be there with money. There will be national money coming in and national groups too.
We saw racist attack ads surrounding crime, juxtaposing image of Mandela Barnes and a crime scene, that sort of thing. And that's what's on my mind is...
Well, these are partisan races, and there will be partisan tactics. And so I think, the candidates, I mean, they're not naive. These candidates are, they know what will, if they enter a race, what will hit them. And so they have to be... prepared for it. It's not, these ads are in the court of public opinion, if you will, right? Voters have, if they don't like the ads, well, first of all, they can choose not to look at the ads. But if they look at the ads and don't like them, they can, vote against the ads if they want. So again, after all of that, Mandela Barnes still only lost by 27,000 votes. I think that certainly doesn't rule out that a Black man can be elected statewide in Wisconsin.
So I want to talk about people and how they vote and make decisions on the Supreme Court justices. It's a little bit different, right, than some of the other elected offices. So I want to ask, what are the qualifications for running for Supreme Court?
It's a resume, but we also talked it's important to have a law and order component to have been a prosecutor or to have been a DA. Those are, I think, important to voters because they view the courts as a lot of it being surrounding public safety, even though, again, this is not a trial court, this is an appellate court.
Right. And I wanted to just get into the fact you pointed out that these candidates should not and likely will not be talking about specifically how they would rule on a case because they might have to recuse themselves. But obviously, there's this partisan nature of the court these days. I just want to know, has it always been that way? It seems like there's been a shift. Certainly,
there has been a shift. A lot of these campaigns used to be pretty sleepy. In some instances, some justices won unopposed. I think I have to go back and look. I think David Prosser actually won one of his terms, 10-year terms, unopposed, which is extraordinary if you think about that today. But, the big race, I think that's, set a partisan tone, for years to come, was the 2008 race. Republicans and Republican groups nationally got very involved in this race. And this was part of a national trend where Republicans were, they were doing, trying to assert control over state legislatures. They were also very much trying to take control of state Supreme Courts and state judiciaries. This was a national thing, and it was going on in Wisconsin. And so, that's when Republicans, and that was a nasty, that was a very partisanized race. And so what ended up happening then is, Republicans, conservatives have been control of the court ever since.
Jeff, thank you so much for giving us your political insights. They are invaluable.
Yeah, sure. Anytime, Bianca.
That was Jeff Mayers, president of WisPolitics.com. The primary election is Tuesday, February 21st. The two candidates with the most votes will then move on to the April election. And here's what else Madison's talking about. 5 UW-Madison students are running for Madison City Council. This could be a record. They're running to represent 3 downtown and campus area districts, locations that generally hug the isthmus and include a good portion of the university. And quick shout out to our conversation from last week with current alder Sabrina Madison on what it takes to run for alder. Give it a listen. And can you make a living as a musician in Madison? Who gets opportunities and who succeeds? That's the question the Greater Madison Music City Project is trying to answer. They've got a new report coming out today about the economics of the Madison music scene and our racial disparities. They're talking about it today at Cafe Coda over on Willie Street. The event starts at 4:30. And have you heard that Jefferson Middle School is getting a new name? It's now down to 4 options: Sally Hemings, Eston Hemings Jefferson, Ezekiel Gillespie, and Maya Angelou. Sally Hemings was the enslaved mother of Thomas Jefferson's children. Eston Hemings Jefferson was one of those children who actually lived in Madison. Ezekiel Gillespie sued Wisconsin for the right to vote. And Maya Angelou is, well, Maya Angelou! I mean, need we say more? The staff of Jefferson Middle School had asked the school board for a new name, one who wasn't a slave owner. The board will vote on the new name next year. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. We're produced by Molly Stens and Dylan Brogan. Music is by Carl Christensen. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell someone who loves Law and Order about us? Dum bum 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 bum. You can also get more news delivered right to your inbox from our friends at Madison Minutes. We'll be back Tuesday morning with more news from around the city. Talk soon. Dum bum 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 bum.